So again, thank you everyone for coming out on such a hot day. This isn't a funeral today that we're doing. This is a celebration of a life. It's a little late, 75 years late today. Our good friend, dear Mr. Forepaw, died exactly 75 years ago today. And, we'd like to do a little bit of a celebration of his life. I'm going to start, rather than start at the beginning of his life, I want to start at the end of his life. He ended up being one of three bachelors. They call them the three bachelors of Phoenix, who stayed after the mines and the smelters and everything disappeared, including the railway. The three of them were the only ones that lived out their years at Phoenix as Phoenix crumbled to dust. The other two bachelors received their gravestones some time ago. We were just a little late with Forepaw. William Banbury over there was one of the three, and a fellow by the name of Densler, Robert Densler, is buried in Greenwood Cemetery. I want to just read something from the Grand Forks Gazette to give everyone an idea of just how this man was thought of in the community. The community of Grand Forks, the community of Phoenix, and the community in Greenwood. This is dated August the 13th. This is a week after he died. The mayor of Phoenix is dead, and with him has gone that host that made him so long a romantic figure in the old copper camp, where Granby shipped its tens of millions of tons of ore before it became a ghost town. Adolph Sercu, known for more than 40 years as Forepaw, and a name in which he took much pride, suffered a stroke a few weeks ago, died in the Grand Forks Hospital on August the 6th, 75 years ago today. His remains were laid to rest in the old Phoenix Cemetery, where so many of his old friends rest. At his request, his lie beside those of Eugene Shea, and with Banbury on the other side of him. They say Forepaw is no more. The man who played host to many hundreds of visitors to the most famous ghost town of British Columbia has dusted his last ore sample and has given his last cheery welcome to visitors to Phoenix. Forepaw will always be known as one of those bachelors, and probably his main claim to fame, if that is correct, was the fact that he stayed there until he died, and that he greeted people. He called himself the mayor, he called himself the chief constable, he called himself the magistrate. He walked around with a gun, with a rifle. Mr. Banbury claims that Forepaw had something like 17 different rifles, and he was quite proud of the whole collection that he had. But he was there to greet people, the tourists, who just wanted to come and see what the old town looked like. And as it started to disappear, one building at a time, Forepaw continued to show people what was there. He also collected money. He also collected $5 for each house and $10 for each building. That in some cases it was ranchers that came by who wanted some old wood. And the inside of some of these homes and buildings were actually quite elaborate. And so that was one way that he That's one way that he raised money. Uh, he lived a very frugal life for sure. But that's probably how more people know him, because of his life in Phoenix after the ore was gone and the mines were gone and the smelters were gone. I'll go back and just very quickly. He lived a very interesting life. He left Belgium in 1889 under unfortunate circumstances. It involved a young lady who was pregnant, and Mr. Sercu wasn't all that excited about staying around, and he left. And he left in a big way because he never returned. And he came across the Atlantic on a cattle boat. He became familiar with how to handle cattle, and that was his first job when he got to the United States. Was being a cowboy in Illinois. What was particularly interesting, because it gave Mr. Sercu his nickname, when he got off the boat in New York City, and he couldn't speak a word of English, and it seemed like he was having a difficult time getting the immigration people to understand who he was and what his name was. And somehow in that crazy world that must have been the immigration services as each ship came in, he took on the name Forepaw. And Forepaw was the name of the man who had the largest circus in New York City on the day that Sercu landed in New York. And somehow, a misunderstanding perhaps, but the immigration people thought that Sercu was the word for circus, and that they put together circus, and this man who owned the circus in New York City, his name was Adolph Forepaw, not spelled like that, and very English name actually. And somehow that nickname it just stuck with him, and he told everybody from then on that his name was Forepaw. Eventually, he did go cowboying in Illinois and made his way across the United States into Washington State, doing a little bit of prospecting. And in 1897, he ended up crossing the border to Camp McKinney, then to Rock Creek, then to Greenwood, and then to Phoenix. And he was a prospector, and everybody was looking for gold, and everybody wanted to get rich. In 1901, Canada census has him listed in the census as living in a house together with 7 prostitutes. And I thought that would be just a historical footnote that you could have a census and have people classified in that kind of a way. But he then started a stagecoach freight line between Phoenix and Greenwood. A couple of years later, he sold it, went back prospecting. Sometime in about 1915, he had an accident getting out of his wagon, and he basically blew off most of the lower part of his right arm. The doctors in Phoenix wanted to amputate. He didn't want to, and so he suffered for almost 2 years with was something that just wasn't right, and it eventually got infected and whatever. And he ended up, and this again is something fascinating to think about the times. He ended up going to the United States. Had some difficulty getting across into the States, but finally in February of 1917, he ended up getting across the border. And he went to a place in Rochester, Minnesota, called the Mayo Clinic. And it's the first time I found that out, I just shook my head, and I couldn't believe that. I mean, the Mayo Clinic at that time was the world's renowned medical hospital, whatever. But he decided he was going to go to the best. And he went there with the idea that they would be able to help him. You know, they helped him. The only thing they could do was to take his arm off. Came back. First thing he did when he got off the train was that he went to the blacksmith and he said, "Make me an arm. Make me something that I can use." And so there it was in 1917. He had an arm. By 2 years later, Phoenix was becoming a ghost town because the smelters and the mines had closed down. And he was brought on by the Granby Company as a caretaker. He took it a little further step as far as caretaker. They wanted somebody to kind of watch out, make sure that people weren't stealing things, and that. He made himself the mayor, he made himself the magistrate, and the chief constable. And he did that for the next 20 years. And again, probably became the best known old pioneer of the time by being the greeter of everybody that came into Phoenix. So here we are today, dedicating this gravestone. Mr. Sercu is getting two celebrations of a life, 75 years apart. Some of us will be lucky maybe to get one celebration of a life if we have any friends or family still alive when we pick the whatever. But I'd like to thank some people here. This doesn't happen overnight. The Sercu family, who contributed to the costs. The Flemish Canadian Circle of Friends, which is a society. They're really the ones that were instrumental in getting this whole thing going. The Boundary Historical Society, that this wouldn't have happened without them. I think Les is going to, in a minute here, going to explain the connection of this cemetery to the Boundary Historical Society. And we had a number of, and also the Grand Forks Funeral Home contributed in a very substantial way. Not only did they have this made, but they gave us a big break. So thank you to them. And we had monies from a number of anonymous donors. Too many names to say. But, thank you to everybody. And, hopefully this will last forever. Certainly last. So at this point, Gordy, do you have something to play for us?
Sure.
Les is going to have something to say.
A tune called My Home.
gentlemen.
First, a thank you to the piper. I've heard that people have described piper music as something that could wake the dead, and maybe we've awoken a few of them here to take notice of the respect that we're paying to Mr. Sercu here. I am the president of the Historical Society, and we were part of the effort into this, but a lot of it goes to Al and other people in Greenwood who have taken upon themselves to make this happen. Whether or not all of you know this, when we came into this procession here, right behind the piper, there were two of us who share something with Mr. Sercu, and that is that all of us came from away, as they say in some places in eastern Canada. We came from away and we came to here, and this is probably where we're going to die, just like Mr. Sercu. He came from farther away than we did, but they say that when you're born, you have your family and you have your place. And some people never leave those. But other people, they get itchy feet and they move on, and they search for friends. And the friends and the place that you end up in are the places that you picked for yourself. It's your choice. He ended up here, we've ended up here, and we're here to recognize the fact that he's become part of our history. And in historical context, things happen, events happen, places come up and they go away, and those are the things that a lot of people remember, but it's the people who actually make the history. It's the stories of the people who make that history come to life for other people to be able to understand how we got to where we are, what we were, maybe help us understand where we want to go and what we want to become. I'm glad that we've been able to participate in helping Al and other people put this marker in and recognize Mr. Sercu's contribution to the history of this place and this community. The Historical Society has a responsibility to maintain the lower cemetery and this cemetery, and we're trying to get back into that. Not all of us heard of it before, so it's been a bit of time getting back to it. But this is valuable to the community. This place, Phoenix, is no longer around for people to visit. So they have to visit this place. They have to visit and talk to people in Greenwood, in Grand Forks, in Christina Lake. I know that there are places in Christina Lake, considering what he was talking about, Mr. Sercu's maintenance and janitorial duties and selling off pieces of the town. I know that there are places in Christina Lake that have more artifacts from Phoenix than either of the museums in Grand Forks and Greenwood. And that's a testament to people from the area seeing value in the things that were in Phoenix. It was no small place. And in a sense, most of us have never seen it, but we miss it. It's left a hole, not just in the top of the mountain, but here in our hearts. This is how we fill that hole. I won't bore you with any more information, or any more talking, but this is what it takes to preserve history and keep it alive. And we're glad to do it. Happy to do this. It's least we do. Thank you all for coming out today and helping us meet. And for the people who actually contributed, thank you. Next slide.